Some would even say legendary. I'm going to tell you a few of those tonight. When Chatham County formed from what was previously part of Orange County in the 1770s, Joseph John Austin, who became famously known as Chatham Jack, bought up thousands of acres of land. By 1830, Jack was the largest landowner and slave owner in the county, with over 160 slaves to his name. He was a member of the General Assembly and founded the Mount Vernon Methodist Church. And of his many properties, he was known to spend his days at Aspen Hall in Pittsburgh, which is now registered as a National Historic Location. Aspen Hall was a two-story federal-style house with a Greek Revival facade. I'd like to tell you the legend of Chatham Jack, but we should probably pump the brakes for a second. So there's the thing about folklore, in that it more or less uses facts merely as a jumping-off place. From talking to historians, I know it tends to drive them crazy, but as was popularized by the film The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, the saying goes, when legend becomes fact, print the legend. My point is, Joseph John Austin was commonly known as Chatham Jack, probably because he owned in more than half the county. But there's also a legend about Chatham Jack that doesn't necessarily jive with the facts about Austin as we know them. So I say that to say this. The story is a story, and I don't know where the truth ends and the legend begins, but it was sometime after the Civil War, and a local businessman and gambler known as Chatham Jack had some problems. Jack was a bit of a scallywag. He liked to drink and play cards. But when he wasn't drinking, he was thought of as a decent man. He had a handful of servants, some of whom had been former slaves, but continued to work for Jack. One particular boy, Aaron, was the son of a freed slave, was quite loyal to Jack, and would come with him wherever he went like a personal valet. Jack was also a bad drinker. One night, he handed the boy a stack of cash and told him that he was going to go out gambling and drinking. He said to the boy, "No matter how much I ask you for this money, don't give it to me." Jack couldn't afford to lose that money. The boy agreed to do as he was told. Of course, Chatham Jack got drunk, lost all his money, and eventually went to the boy begging for the cash. As the boy was instructed, he refused and held tight on the wad of cash. "No, sir, you said not to, and I'll listen to that, man." Well, Chatham Jack wasn't just a bad drunk. He was a mean drunk, too. The boy's refusal to follow commands infuriated him. Shadam Jack beat the poor boy, hitting him with his cane over and over. And yet the boy was still loyal, at least to the sober Jack. He continued to hold steadfast and take the beating. Sadly, Jack's drinking got the better of him, and once his rage took over, he wasn't able to take it back. Chatham Jack beat the poor servant boy to death. That's a bad enough story, and it could stop there, but it's well known around certain parts of Chatham County that even to this day, the ghost of Aaron, the poor servant boy, is said to haunt Aspen Hall. Over the years, some Chatham County folks have even been said to contact old Aaron through the use of a Ouija board. I, for one, would be quite curious to hear what Aaron had to say and find out if he was still loyal to the man who killed him. Curious for sure, but not enough to pick up a planchette. Near the southeast corner of Chatham County is the community of Moncure. And near there, the Haw River and Deep River converge to form the westernmost point of the Cape Fear River. From there, the river flows over 100 miles to Wilmington, Bald Head Island, to the Cape Fear itself. It's believed that Cape Fear got its name from early 16th century explorers who nearly shipwrecked trying to navigate its waters. Many sailors have sought passage through these waters only to find them more treacherous than bargained for. After all, they don't call the coastal waters the graveyard of the Atlantic for nothing. Fish, however, had no difficulties at all. There were several species that swam from the Atlantic Ocean far up the Cape Fear River, possibly as far as Chatham County, to a little area known as Mermaid Point. The Atlantic sturgeon, for example, spawn in fresh water, much like the salmon. They would still be found in those waters today if it wasn't for the value of their eggs. The Cape Fear sturgeon were nearly hunted to extinction for their caviar. In 1740, the area around Mermaid Point was settled by 4 Scotsmen, Duncan Campbell, James McLaughlin, and brothers Hector and Neil McNeil. If some of those names sound familiar to you, perhaps you're familiar with the Carolina Haints telling of the tale of Neil McNeil, the Scotsman of barbecue, whose ghost haunted the banks of Smiley's Falls for centuries after his death. And we've also talked about mermaids on Carolina Haints. Perhaps most memorably, we told the story of the mermaid riots in Wilmington, in which the capture of an alleged mermaid was thought to have conjured a deadly hurricane. Ironically, according to legend, it was a real mermaid that gave name to Mermaid Point. A man named Ambrose Ramsey opened a tavern overlooking the confluence of the Hall, Teep, and Cape Fear rivers. The current formed a long sandbar at that point, as such aquatic intersections often do, but in this particular sandbar, it was said that mermaids could be found. People on the way home from the sandbar would see them laughing and singing late at night in the waters around the sandbar. Sometimes the mermaids would sit up on the sandbar combing their long, beautiful hair. But if they ever got caught by people looking at them, they would quickly dive below the surface and disappear for the night. Of course, it's believed that the mermaids no longer visit Mermaid Point, sadly. It's thought that the construction of various dams along the Cape Fear have blocked their way, and the sandbar is basically underwater now. But there may be another, more obvious answer to the absence of the mermaids. If you look at mermaid sightings around the world, they often match up with sturgeon spawning grounds. Think about the large, distinct tail on a sturgeon and how similar it is to a traditional mermaid artwork. Couple that with the fact that witnesses only saw them late at night when people were coming home from the bar, never when they were on their way to it. And I can't help but notice that the Cape Fear mermaid sightings disappeared about the same time that the sturgeons were being hunted for their caviar. But forgive me, let's not be contrarians for the sake of rational thought. Yes, it's true that mermaids have traditionally been thought to be sea creatures, not river creatures, but if you ask me, I say never let a little thing like the truth stand in the way of a good story. That leads us to our next and final tale of the strange and unexplained parts of Chatham County. The area around Siler City is mostly rural farms and wooded land, like most of Chatham County. But a few miles south of Siler City on State Road 1100 is a bare patch of earth. Yep, that's it. No bells, no whistles, no fireworks, just a bare strip of dirt. So what makes this unassuming vegetation-free clearing any different from the millions of bare patches of dirt all around the world? That would be legend. The story claims that the devil himself comes to this spot every night, pacing around and around, devising fresh evils to unleash on the world. It's this act that has given the spot its name, the Devil's Tramping Ground. Before the Moravians expanded into North Carolina, the immigrant population was predominantly from Ulster, an area bordering England and Scotland. And as such, the devil was an integral part of their culture. Any strange or unexplained locations would very often be named the devil's something. North Carolina has 7 devils: Kill Devil Hills, Devil's Rock, Devil's Stairs, Devil's Courthouse, Devil's Branch, Devil's Chimney, Devil's Head, Devil's Knob, 2 different places known as the Devil's Fork, 4 known as the Devil's Elbow, and there's even a Devil's Tater Patch. Over the past 300 years, our expectations of the devil has changed somewhat. Satan's become a well-known part of modern culture, and if the devil were to materialize today, we would expect something more impressive than just walking around in a circle. But that's the legend. The devil comes to the tramping ground at night to pace and to plot. Modern man in his science has attempted to find a rational explanation for the lack of greenery with the tramping ground's borders. Salt, they say. The ground has a higher than normal salinity. This seems more like a symptom as opposed to a cause. Perhaps a better question is why? Why is there just one perfectly round salt deposit in the middle of the millions of acres of woods in Chatham County? It would seem that if it were a natural feature, there would be more patches scattered throughout the area. But there simply isn't. Not to mention the other peculiarities about the devil's tramping ground that salt simply doesn't explain. Like why birds refuse to nest in the trees around the area, or why dogs are reluctant to enter the circle after nightfall, or why sticks and debris left in the tramping ground overnight will be found scattered among the surrounding trees the next morning. Further testing by the North Carolina State Department of Agriculture determined that the soil within the circle is completely sterile. But again, how? Soil is regenerative. Any farmer can tell you that if you overplant a field, the nutrients can be leached from the soil. But by not planting in that field for a couple of years, the soil will return to normal. Most of the time, all it takes is alternating between two different crops from year to year. Crop rotation. But it's been more than a couple of years from the devil's tramping ground, still hasn't recovered. Actually, it's been more than 200. Now, believe it or not, there have been several theories posited about the devil's tramping ground. Some say that it's not a place of the devil, but rather a sacred site of an ancient Native American tribe. This story tells how the tribe would gather in the area, which was known to them as the Great Flats. The tribe would feast and dance through the night, their moccasin feet stomping down the vegetation. This pleased the old gods so much that they blessed the tribe and the site, preserving it forever. Another story, or rather a couple of them, are about a great battle between two rival tribes. The first version of the story says that there was so much blood spilled in the area that no vegetation is able to grow there. The other version says that King Croatoan was killed in the battle and buried under the devil's tramping ground. In both versions, the losing Croatoan tribe fled to the coast where they became the tribe in the Lost Colony saga. This story may not technically be a theory behind the devil's tramping ground, but some years ago, a couple of men got into their heads that there was buried treasure under the circle. So they grabbed some shovels and started digging. They dug quite a hole before they were caught, but they didn't find any treasure. Today, their hole has mostly filled in, but with a slight divot. And of course, there are the UFO conspiracists. There are some who claim the tramping ground is a UFO hotspot. They say that some sort of strange alien radiation that is undetectable by our primitive science has left the ground sterile. And people have reported seeing strange lights in the area at night, but they have also reported seeing red eyes, watching them from the tree line, and shadowy figures moving around just out of clear sight. And a few folks said they were lulled to sleep by a beautiful melodic voice. When they awoke, they found themselves inexplicably miles away from the tramping ground. Now, here's something I don't get to say very often. The invisible UFO radiation theory is not the strangest idea associated with the devil's tramping ground. There's a group that's proposed changing the name of the circle to the Chatham County Vortex. They say that the site is a Magdalene crystal column of energy. So what the hell does that mean? I'm not entirely sure, but bear with me and I'll explain the best I can. And if there's any followers of the Magdalene flame listening, forgive me if I get it wrong a little bit. It begins with the notion of male and female spiritual energies. This theory recognizes Jesus Christ just as one of the many manifestations of the male energy, along with Muhammad and Buddha and several other spiritual leaders. And by extension, Mary Magdalene, also known as the divine feminist, was just one representation of the female spirit. This has evolved as a movement known as the Magdalene Flame, incorporating a Jungian mysticism, a legend that claims Jesus once visited England, and feminist retellings of the Arthurian legends. They believe that a Magdalene energy exists as a web of divine energy around the globe, touching down at various energy nodes, like the Tramping Ground. In pop culture, the Devil's Tramping Ground has appeared in several books and a handful of movies that bear the name of the title. And let's not forget other forms of inspiration. The Aviator Brewing Company in nearby Fuquay Varina makes a 9.2% Belgian triple called the Devil's Tramping Ground. It's about 10 miles south of Siler City on State Road 1100, which has officially been renamed Devil's Tramping Ground Road. But if you plan to visit, you may want to hurry. It seems like the tramping ground is disappearing. A few decades ago, the circle was almost 50 feet across. Today, it's less than half that. I've been fortunate to visit the Devil's Tramping Ground on numerous occasions, but my first trip was in 2010 for the original iteration of Carolina Hanks, which was a crappy, short-lived video blog. Finding the Devil's Tramping Ground was surprisingly easy. While it's commonly listed as being in Siler City, it's actually in the community of Bear Creek, near a little area of note called Harper's Crossroads. There's a well-defined dirt path leading into the woods from a worn parking area on the side of the road. I was concerned about the presence of no trespassing signs at the tramping ground, but no signs were in the vicinity at the time. As I made my way through the tall grass and sandy ground, I was on the lookout for snakes and even other folks. I was aware that this was a common hangout for people wanting to get a first-hand look at the supernatural. You know, weirdos like me. While I didn't find any weirdos, I certainly saw the handiwork of a few weirdos. One of the first things I found was an old, gray, rotted-looking pillow or blanket, which was tied together with a rope and hanging approximately 30 feet from a tree branch. Part of me wanted to cut the thing down and look inside, but the bigger part of me knows better. If curiosity killed the cat, then I'm fine staying curious. Another image that genuinely scared me into an audible gasp was that of a black figure on a nearby tree. When I first visited the tramping ground, it was right before dusk, and in those dim twilight minutes before total darkness, I decided to briefly explore some of the woods just outside the circle when my wandering eyes passed by the figure of a man, lit up by my rapidly dying flashlight. I don't know what my excited brain must have thought at first glimpse. Perhaps it was the visage of the devil himself, coming to trample the ground as he's famous for doing. After I got over the initial shock, I fixed my light upon the tree and approached it for a better look. It was an odd marking of a side profile of a man. It was black, most likely spray paint, but in the dark it looked almost burnt, charred right into the wood. There were a few more similar images on other trees nearby, but I was on guard at this point, and they didn't get me like the first one did. Now to the infamous circle itself. It's about 20 to 30 feet in diameter, and what they say about nothing growing inside of it is true. There's no vegetation, no grass, no weeds. One thing I was curious about, but can't speak much on, was the notion that anything left inside the circle will be removed. Well, it was plainly obvious that folks had used the center of the tramping ground as for a fire pit. There were still a few charred logs and ashes in the center. Around the center of the circle were 3 wooden stumps placed all around the perimeter, presumably as stools to enjoy the fire. I placed a kerosene lantern near the middle of the circle and came back the next day to find it still in its place. While I don't discount the idea that things had been moved outside of the circle, I can say this unfortunately wasn't the case on that occasion. While I've never experienced anything supernatural on my visits to the tramping ground, I can say the place certainly has a creepy vibe, considering the decades of folklore and oral traditions and writings, considering all the visitors who came either with skeptical minds or hearts full of wonder. It's not hard to imagine all that leaving a mark. Now consider how many times it's likely that someone's come to that spot for nefarious purposes. I'm not aware of any satanic rituals or animal sacrifices or anything like that, But if there ever was a place that would seem to invite that element, the devil's tramping ground would certainly